Hey everyone, welcome to this little video of the Cauldron. As promised, this is a little surprise for you guys. We just wanted to answer a couple of questions and show you through our work progress. How we work, how we handle ingredients and such. Fura was supposed to be co-streaming this with me, but we didn't manage to make it work really, so now I'm taking over both parts, so I hope that's okay with you guys. Well, to start, I will later on be mentioning one or two ingredients and telling what their meaning is, so there will be spoilers for the ingredient list later. I will tell you when though, so if you do not want to know anything about any of our ingredients, then that's the point where you should press pause or close the video. For now, I'm just going to talk generally and show you a couple of things, and you don't have to worry about getting spoiled whether you want to know ingredient meanings or not. The first thing you can see here is the Yeti Stage 1. I have no idea how to pronounce Yeti in English, so I'm just sticking with German pronunciation. And I kind of like this design, and it's also a design that we just finished for Stage 2, so I figured it's a good example because I can show you a couple of things on it. And this one is just a quirky little design, and as soon as you see he grows to Stage 2, he matures quite a lot. Which is normal. Our Stage 1s are always chibis, and then they're growing to somewhat young adulthood. What you can also see is that from the design we have a rough design in the Stage 1, and unless the ingredients for the Stage 2 go completely against what we already have, then this design matures with them. So this really is just an adult version with additional details. Some colors changed, design-wise it changed a bit, but usually you can see a progression between different stages. When we create a new ash and put it up for sale, it's usually something that we actually like the idea of working on. For example, the Celestial series that I'm currently doing was something that kind of intrigued me, that I wanted to try for a long time, creating garments and colors and patterns that match a certain time of day. And then we put the ash up for sale, and people can either give us ingredients and it goes completely against anything we had planned at first, or it goes absolutely with what we had in mind. And it's always a journey, and it's always an adventure, and it's always fun for us to see where things are going. Sometimes we see ingredient list and we have no idea if the person that ordered this had an idea behind it, or if they just picked ingredients at random or whatever was in the inventory. And sometimes we're sitting there like, how are we supposed to make this work? And it's always a challenge, but it's also kind of fun usually. So when we have an overall theme, like for an ash, or if we already have a grown Stage 1 or Stage 2, then we get new ingredients. And what these new ingredients do is they influence the growth. We imagine how, for example, the Stage 1 Yeti is going to look as a Stage 2, as an adult, just grown up without changing anything. And from there, the ingredients basically change the progression of this character. How did they mature? What changed about them? And that's when we get to this. The ingredients in this case didn't change too much. They basically kept in style with what was already there. So it was easy for us to come up with a nice design and just focus on other things instead, not having to change too much. Fura starts with a basic rough outline of the character. She draws the character and then draws the clothes atop it. And this is how I usually get the files from her. As you can see, I blurred out the notes up here. Those are usually just the order ingredients, what's going into the Stage 2 character. and a few notes for myself from her very often, because I tend to forget a lot, like seriously a lot. And yeah, as you can see, I'm getting this nicely sorted by her. Every layer is named, and depending on what you click, you can just see, okay, this is the part I'm currently coloring or shading. And then comes my actual work part. She writes up here which colors were added, and then I'm trying to make a transition between what is already there and what are the new colors. And in this case, we had a couple of new colors. Before we had predominantly white colors and bluish hues, and now suddenly there were a lot more colors coming in, like black became rather dominant, and instead of silver I'm suddenly using golden edges here. So what I'm trying to do when I get a color scheme is I have the base color scheme, and either I can work the already existing colors and the new colors together in an easy way, or sometimes when they are not quite matching, then I try to keep one of the two schemes dominating and add smaller details that were already there from the old color scheme, or smaller details from the new color scheme. If, for example, I get a stage 1, stage 1s are the easiest to color, not only because there are only very few ingredients, but if there is a color that completely doesn't match my color scheme otherwise, I always have the option, unless contact lenses were used, to just use that one odd color that doesn't match for the eyes. Because if you have colors that give a nice harmony and then there's one color that doesn't match it, in the clothing it looks weird, but if you use it for the eyes, then you make the eyes pop. In this case, for example, the gold for the eyes is nice and warm, while down here all the other colors are mostly cool. So the first thing you notice when looking at this character is the golden eyes and the dark fur, because they do not match with the rest of the color scheme. And basically that's what I'm trying to do. I try to keep colors balanced. For example, here we have the dark coat and everything, but we also have these dark and light parts, and they aren't all the dark parts up here and all the light parts down here, but I try to mix and match them. So there's not just a focus on one part of the character, but the eye is able to wander, but that's just design choices that I make. Alright, one of you guys asked me how I color my eyes, so I'm going to make a small, basically just show you how I do it. You can see on my channel for the Cauldron that I have quite a lot of speed paints, where I show you the overall progression through my works, but I'm just going to try and show you how I'm doing eyes right now. For Cauldron coloring and shading, I'm using only two pens. There is the pencil for my hard shades and the soft 2 for my light ones. It's just pencils that at one point or another I created, made from basic brushes that were already there, and they just work for this sort of shading very well. Now these eyes are yellow. Usually when I color, I like to go down here for shades. We have violet, we have blue, purple, and these light grays set on a multiply layer, they give a nice darker color. The problem is though, since this is a very warm color, if I go in here with blue and set it on multiply, it kind of looks like a dirty brown, and I don't like that. So when I'm shading warmer colors, I tend to color pick whatever color there is, and I have my color wheel up here, and I start going towards darker colors, or cooler colors, so to say, and then I pick a shade color around this area. And what it does, if you check here, it looks way warmer. I can give you an example on the other side. This looks more grayish, and this looks actually like a nice orangey brown shade. So with my first layer and multiply, I apply my basic eye shades like the pupils, these sort of rings on the side that I like a lot, and the shadow that comes from the upper eyelid. Eyes are always darker on the top than they are on the bottom, because our lashes and such, they just cover that up. Then a second layer, usually when there's a light color like this, I like to darken the pupils again to make them pop. And with a soft brush, go up here again for more shading from the top. Depending on the kind of eye I want to make, I sometimes like to make more simplistic eyes, but sometimes I also do more detailed ones. I'm going to show you a bit more detailed one now. I'm adding a bit of these lines here. So they just are small details that don't really do much, but they give a bit more depth to the eye. And last but not least, once the shades are done, I always use a light yellow brush for highlights and put my layer on Add Glow, as you can see. And what this does is it just makes the color beneath glow. This was a bit too far. And just set in a few highlights here. And since eyes are very reflective, they are kind of wet, so they reflect a lot of light, there's supposed to be reflective lights on them. And because they're going over the entire eye, so the sclera to not just the iris, I'm adding a new layer on top of everything, also above the line art. And then I create my reflective lights. I like to add these white highlights over the entire eye that just go from one side to the other and only have a little break here in the middle. A smaller highlight here, and then depending on how I feel or how light or dark the color is, a few more highlights around the bottom of the iris. And that's how I color my eyes. The sclera part is equally easy to do, just using a color, shading color like this. Erase the top a bit, and then add the direct shading from the upper lip. And that's it. And if you check here, that's all I did here as well. As you can see, there's the pupil, there's the space shadow above, those small details here. Yeah. For male characters, I sometimes tone down on the reflective lights a bit, because if it's too many reflective lights, it tends to look kinda shoujo manga style, like those typical girl animes. So for my character, I sometimes leave out the small highlight here or a few small highlights here, but that just depends on the character. Okay, we looked at this just now with the eye shadings, how I shade my eyes. And the rest of my shading process is basically the same, going for multiply layers for the shadows, using cooler colors, and then just going either layer by layer or going group by group. Sometimes I like to group items. Like for example, this top here, it's all one item, so to say. I don't have to shade this part extra from this part. I don't have to shade this part extra from this part. It's one top, even though it has multiple colors. So for example, this I group in a folder and just shade it as one clothing item instead of adding shades and highlights to every single layer on its own. And the end result is a finished stage 2 Yeti. Yeah. Now, what I want to talk about with you next is our design process, and for this I will mention the meaning of citrine, which is one of our stones, and how it influenced the Yeti different from another adoptable. So if you do not wish to know any sort of spoilers for our ingredient list, then you have to tune out now. If not, I'm just going to go ahead. So citrine was added to this stage 1 adoptable, and as you can see, back then Fure implemented it as these fur parts. Citrine itself is described in our ingredients list as fluffy, fur, feathers, puffy shapes. So in this case it matched perfectly. We have a Yeti, which means it's a wintry theme, cold, it needs the fur, so that worked perfectly for this adoptable. And in 90% of the cases when Fure gets citrine, she tries to adopt it as fur, because fur just looks nice on many designs, especially since we are mostly in a fantasy themed group here. So as you can see, fur just goes nicely, whether it's here on the sleeves, it gives a nice royal look, or if it's the ear puffs here, just works well. Now, I had a different design here, and fur on this more elegant ash would have looked weird. I added a citrine here too, though. I was free to pick my own ingredients, and I added a citrine. And the difference is that I didn't go for the fur, but what I went for was the feathery look. Here and here. I like this because it gave the whole character a fluffy, light feeling to her, while fur would have just been more heavy, on the heavier side. And since I wanted her to be elegant and flowy and daylight and all these blues and uplifting, and you can also see in the movement, I just wanted it to be more of a light feeling, the feathers worked very well. What this means for us in our design process is that we usually get ingredients and they have a description. Like for example with citrine, it's fluffy, fur, feathers, puffy shapes. We have other stuff like for example diamond and such. Lots of stones that influence what the design will look like. But it's always up for our own interpretation. We have, for example, pyrite, which is metal and armor, but it can also be interpreted as armor or heavy jewelry. This is important for us because we are a semi-customizable adopt group. What we are doing is we create, and Fure and I are both of the same mindset. We want to create things that we are proud of. We want, of course, for our clients to be happy too, but we are human, and both Fure and I are doing this as a side job. We are earning our money with this, but at the same time, this is something we are passionate about. And we want to really love the characters we are doing, and we do. I can't remember a single character that we created that I was like, I don't like this character. Whether it went the way we imagined at first or whether it took a completely different turn. We still stand behind our designs, we like them, and that puts a piece of ourselves into them. If we just create it for the sake of creating, doing exactly whatever our ingredients say, like as soon as something says fluffy, then no matter designs, I'll add big puffs of fluff around here. we wouldn't stand behind it. It wouldn't look as good. The character wouldn't be harmonizing. And that's something we try to avoid at any cost. We try to love our characters as if they're our own. Seriously, between Fura and me, we sometimes had Cauldron adoptables that we looked at and we're like, do we really have to sell those? We want to keep them. And we have this quite a bit, unfortunately, and it's always like, oh, I don't want to let them go. But I think that that's something that you can feel in our adoptables. We love them, and we don't just want to create to earn money. We want to create and share and create actual characters that can be loved. And for that, each character has to have a sort of personality. It has to match. If we had, for example, a beach Ash and they were wearing only a female with a bikini and some nice flowery details and such, and on the next step we added items that made them masculine and wearing armor, then we wouldn't necessarily take this character for the next step, give them a manly figure and place him in armor, but well, we could probably give her an armor bra, whatever, but we wouldn't stand behind that. So what we would do in such a case is we would take the character, we would keep her in mind, we would maybe change her bikini to her wearing some sort of what they call swim trunks instead of a bikini, give her keep her bikini top or whatever, but then give her heavy jewelry that maybe reminds a bit of armor, because that's free for our own interpretation. So we can actually make the ingredients match the character and not just slap whatever ingredients we have onto the character and just go with whatever the ingredients say. We try to design by actually thinking about what makes this character work. And that's kind of the reason why sometimes our adoptables take a long time to upload or to create, for us to create them, because we want to make them work and want them to look good in the end. We are just human, just like anyone else. And sometimes our creativeness has its limits, and especially when things are tough, IRL, then this creative process is just slowed down. For example, I myself just was in a creative block for what felt like over a month. It was over a month, felt almost like 2 months. And it was just because I was at Comic-Con. I was drawing so much there and I was preparing so hard there that afterwards I was just knocked out creatively. And I sat down at the dusk stage and tried to draw on it, and just wouldn't come out. Everything I looked at, it was anatomically correct, it worked basically, but I wasn't standing behind that, what I created. It wasn't feeling the same as the other 2 celestial stages that I did. This, for example, has a lot of life and light and just movement, and I love it, and it just didn't work that way for the dusk stage one. Can actually show her to you real quick. At the point of recording this, I haven't uploaded Dusk Stage 1 yet, but this is her. And I actually really like how she turned out. She's different from the other 2, but I like the design, and I was given specific instruction for some of the items, but then was given freedom for the other items, which is always great for myself, because then I can just go wild and put everything I want into them and go with them to a way that I feel actually matches them. And for the Dusk Stage 1, I just wanted her to be something more dark, almost demonic, because the Day and Dawn Stage 1s were more like this holy kind of feeling, almost divine, and I was given items that were supposed to be over-the-top fantasy and Chinese themed, so of course I was going for a more Chinese feeling here. It was just great to be able to add a bit of whimsical, a bit of color, just make her special that way. And because I wasn't feeling well the past 1.5 months, I wasn't getting her done the way I wanted. I had a sketch, she looked anatomically alright, but it just felt boring and stiff, and I wasn't feeling the character. This character I completely feel. She has this dark vibe, and I love her eyes, and I'm just in love with the whole design, how she turned out. And that's something that I feel not only myself and Fure can tell when we actually like or love what we're doing, but everyone else can as well, because it just has this little gleam. It just feels like more. It's hard to describe, but I hope you get what I mean. So that's, for example, also a reason why I myself say I can't do the designing as often, because the design part takes a lot from me. The design part is the hardest part for me when I create a character. To make them look a certain way, match a certain theme, and then still feel genuine, still feel real. It's something that I have a hard time with if I can't get to pick everything myself. If I have, in this case it was easier because I just had 2 rather free ingredients. For example, the Chinese theme, I just had to go Chinese kind of style, which I already did with the makeup and the hair and such, and theoretically I could have gone a completely different route with the clothing just by having the hair and the makeup like this. And the other one was over the top fantasy, and she is over the top fantasy, just yeah, so I was really free in my choices here. But as soon as I get limited, I start to shut down. I don't like how I'm putting a character on the page, and it takes me 12 sketches until I'm happy, and that's something that's very time consuming. And given the fact that I'm working, I'm studying, I have a real life, so to say, I'm going to sports, whatever, that's something that I just can't afford in a timely fashion. Then we would have to change prices for the Cauldron completely, because I would have to force myself to sit down and take 3 times the time that Fure takes, and that's just not going to work. I was asked in the chat by you guys whether I considered doing more of these tokens, the Switch tokens, or the for me to take over the line art design or such. That's something that I just can't do very often. I can offer these tokens when I know the next couple of months I will have a lot of time, but I can't do them when I'm not sure if in 2 weeks things will be stressful again, because usually people buy these tokens and then keep them for stage 3. Stage 3 takes a lot of time anyway, needs tons of details, and usually when it's some sort of special token applied to it, then people also add more ingredients usually than are necessary, which means I have to go even deeper with detailing. And if it unfortunately hits a time when I do not have the time to really draw much for the Cauldron, then that's just bad. You have to wait. I feel horrible that you have to wait so long. I should be working on this, but at the same time I have to study for exams, write on my bachelor thesis, whatever it is that keeps me from it. It just makes me feel horrible, and that's why we bring out these items so rarely. I can't really answer the questions that you asked about the faunas and such, since Fure and I are currently both in a bit of, we don't have as much time right now. Usually what we are doing is we're trying to plan ahead. We have this weekly turnover at the moment that we announce new sales at the beginning of the week for the weekend. And that makes it a lot easier for us, because we can just say, okay, this week I have a lot of time, I will draw a fauna, or I can say, hey, throw in that next celestial ash, I got the time to do it next week. And that makes it easier for us to plan ahead. And I'm pretty sure there will be more faunas. I'm pretty sure there will be more elemental ashes or other series that we are going to continue and keep doing. For example, the Midnight Ash, I'm just waiting for a good time when I can put that one out. And as soon as we see, okay, this is a good time for something that we'd collaborate on, like a regular Ash, or this is a week when Fura should do something on her own because I don't have any time at all to prepare anything, or at the moment next week I will know I'm absolutely free to work on stuff, throw in some sort of Ash that I work on alone. That's the kind of stuff that we can plan ahead at the moment, and that's making our life so much easier. And yeah, with stuff like these tokens, especially design tokens on my part, that's something I just can't predict. Shading tokens is a different story. I like those shading tokens because this is a consistent style that I have at the moment for the Cauldron. I color all my Cauldron adoptables the same. When I do one of my own pictures and I do my soft cell shading, it takes a bit longer and the style isn't as consistent. I just keep changing that style and I haven't found the one style for that yet, so it just keeps changing. So when putting out one of these tokens, I can't guarantee that each shading with this token is going to look the same. It takes a bit longer, but it's also fun. But that's something that I don't mind so much. The design process is something that is very tiring for me. That's why Fura and I decided to go for her designing and for me being more in the color and shading side. Well, and that basically concludes our little tour around the Cauldron. And if you have questions, you can just ask them in the Discord chat or send us a note. And I hope we will see you around. Bye bye!